Hello. Hey, Mitch, can you hear me?
Can you hear? I can hear you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. So we're set. I was going to
How's
say
it
I have
going?
another microphone just in case.
No, my volume was all the way down on my computer, so it's usually like the most simple solution or whatever. But how's it going?
It's going all right, and I'd like to point out to your audience that I found the white balance adjustment for my webcam. So hopefully, um, I don't look so washed out this time. Don't look like I'm being interrogated. Sure, that'll happen soon enough. So, but
Sounds good. Well,
yeah, man, I got a stack of books for us to some stuff here to talk about. I don't know whatever you got on your end. Of
I
course,
got
I
a
have.
few. Actually, I was gonna before we jumped in, somebody in the comments had an interesting suggestion here. I've never heard of this book. Uh, but it sounds like a pretty good one. The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon. Have you ever heard of?
Most of Bernays' ideas come straight from here. Vaughn wrote at a time when newspapers were a technology and the only format. No, I'm not familiar with that. That's probably one of those names is probably referenced, and
In the
I ought
book.
to look and see if it's in. Yeah, it might be hard to look up in here because it's not as thorough of an index. But this is "Man the Puppet" by
Okay.
Abram Lipsky. The Art of Controlling Minds. And
Ooh.
this is from 19, it's right at about 100 years old, I think. Yeah, from 1925. So
Okay.
my lovely bride got this for me for my birthday a few years ago because this one was fetching a small sum of change at the time. And then I think right after I got it, then it went into reprint, and I think it's available now, reprinted in a paperback form for probably 20, $30 or so. But this is a good one. It's on just that kind of psychology of mass movements and how people think and how people can be swayed and opinions formed. So this is right in there with again predating, like the viewer was saying, the predating. Oh, and I've got his book too.
Edward Bernays.
Yes, Bernays. I've got
Yeah.
his propaganda, of course, right here. So, but yeah, I got a stack of things here that I have organized kind of in a semblance of kind of hierarchy here.
Okay.
So there is a little bit of rhyme and reason to it. So yeah,
Okay.
you let me know how you want to start out with this, and yeah,
How about you just jump in? I've only got a couple. I thought I'd have more, and I watched your earlier video. You did a video already on I think like the top 10, your 10 favorite books about
oh,
mass media, or
yes, and
yeah,
a lot of that is going to be repeated here, but
yeah.
maybe with a live audience asking questions. I've got a few places bookmarked in here that I wanted to read some sections out of that I think some of you might find edifying. So,
Yeah,
but
absolutely. How about you just jump on in, man?
yeah,
All
so
right.
so one of the first things, and I mentioned this before. This is how to hypnotize yourself and others.
Mm.
And this is a pretty basic book on hypnotism. It's one of those that you can find in most used bookstores. I picked this up. I lost my original copy, and I picked this up just fairly recently, and it was going for $3.99 at Half Price Books.
Okay.
Which I am not a paid. This is not a paid endorsement of Half Price Books. This is just I do this on my own volition. But this has an excellent section in it about hypnotism and how if you're watching TV, you are being put into a state of mild hypnosis and how that is affecting you and affecting your choices.
Interesting.
And when I first read this in 2007, and I had already read like Culture Jam and Four Arguments for the Elimination of Television, but this was the first time I'd ever really seen someone just draw a straight line between hypnotism and television. So I found that really interesting. And now, since I read this, I've read a lot more books that do make that direct connection. And the main reason I point that out with this one is this is by no means a speculative book or fringe literature or anything like this. This is very just matter of factly telling you when you're watching television, you are being hypnotized. And I think
how old was that book? Just out of curiosity.
That's a good question. It's Barnes and Noble Press here. This is from 1981.
Okay. Because I was curious if it had anything in there on like the internet or computers.
Oh yeah, no. That's the crazy thing is a lot of the statistics that are in a lot of the early books that I have about mass media, all that is probably blown out of the water now by the amount of time people spend on social media. So the amount of hours people spend on a device, and just the amazing thing about cell phone technology now is you have this little camera here looking back at you and that is then monitoring the way you are ingesting this information. And I mean, this is a totalitarian's dream of being able to, as someone is scrolling through their feed and they stop at something, you can literally check the dilation of their pupils and see exactly how emotional they're getting and all those things. And I can't remember if I brought this up with you or not last time, but one of the crazier times that you probably everybody watching this, I'm sure, has experienced where you say something around your cell phone and then a few minutes later you open up a browser or something and there's a pop-up ad for the thing you were just discussing. And when we first figured that out, the shop that I had in Dallas, one of my guys, he would deliberately set his phone next to the radio with the Spanish radio station turned on and just wildly confuse the algorithm. But one day I had my cell phone was actually in in one of my offices, and I was in the showroom of my store talking to a customer that had come in. And so I didn't even have my cell phone on my person. It was at least 15, 20 feet away from me. And this guy comes in my store wanting to buy some stuff, and he had this skin condition of that. I forget what that is, where you have the like pigmentation that's missing. It's like there's
starts with an A, I think.
Yeah, somebody will know out there, but it has a very distinct look when people have that. And this guy came in. We never discussed that. He came in, we talked. I sold him the stuff he wanted. He left. I go in and check my social media thing later, just pulling up Facebook or something, and I immediately have ads for treatment for that condition.
Wow.
And this guy wasn't logged into my Wi-Fi. I mean, he was just came in off the street, bought a few things and left, and we never once said this out loud so that one baffles me to this day. It's like, what kind of witchcraft was at work there?
It'd have to be like his phone communicating with yours somehow, right?
There's some proximity thing there that I don't understand, but that really kind of freaked me out, because you know this thing is listening to you and watching you, but to realize that it might be communicating with other people's devices without your permission gets into a whole other level of things. So I'm sure at this point the NSA has officially entered the chat. So I'd like to welcome our minders there. So anyway, this is one that I definitely recommend for anybody who just wants a general understanding of hypnosis. This is a good kind of entry-level book that just explains kind of the basic mechanics of hypnotism. And the main reason, of course, that I tie that into mass media and all that is it really shows you how much belief and expectation factors into the way your mind processes information. Understanding some of those basic mechanics of how your brain works, will greatly change the way you ingest mass media, and hopefully limit it severely. Because when you realize just like how much it's screwing with your head, there's not there's not like a good form of mass media to ingest, in my opinion. The best thing is just to cut it out altogether.
Yeah.
And one of the things in hypnosis, and I'm pretty sure I might have said this in that media video, but this is again good knowledge to think about. When you put a hypnotist, typically for a hypnotist to induce a trance and do it in a way that's effective, they have to communicate authority. So there has to be a very solidly implied authority to the subject being hypnotized in order for that to work. And one of the easiest ways to establish that authority is through height, because when we're kids, we're looking up at mom and dad, they're looking down at us, and that immediately registers as these are the authority figures that are looming over me, quite literally. So one of the things that a hypnotist does is puts the subject below his eye line. So the hypnotist is up here, the subject is down here and looking down. And the more extreme that is, the more pronounced that effect. So the reason I say this in relation to media is when people mount their television sets up high, it has a much more profound effect in how you process that information. You're much more inclined to believe that and accept that information than if you were to put it down lower. And I know that sounds crazy, but
yeah, that's interesting.
in most places you go, they will have the televisions mounted up high.
Oh yeah.
And it has an immediate effect to your subconscious is like this is important. This is the authority figure in the room that's telling you the things. So you should listen up and pay attention.
Wow.
And so in any time, just again, this is why the mechanics are really important, because you can't stop a television broadcast. I mean, I know with like TiVo and things like that, when that came around, people could pause and get up and go to the bathroom. But it's not your normal inclination to just pause something and look it up. Now, I know a lot of the people watching this right now probably do a lot of that, and good for you. That's exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah.
But the tendency of the general public is to just passively take in this information. And when that information is coming at you really fast, you're more inclined to just take it without any kind of checks and balances of critical thinking, because you don't want to miss something, so you're just taking it. And again, you start factoring all these things together, the high sight line and all that, and people dressed up in ways that you don't dress, that's another thing with a hypnotist usually needs to dress in a way that's distinguished from the subject. So if I show up like this and the person I'm hypnotizing is wearing a three-piece suit, I probably can't hypnotize them. Because I look like, now that's not to say it can't be done. I'm just saying it's going to be a lot more difficult, because there's already a perception that they have a greater authority than I do if I look more casual. So, and it's not so much the casual thing too, it's also just the overall, they need to look distinct and different from the surrounding people. So that's why a lot of hypnotists will wear really flashy stuff and like really over the top sport coats and things to distinguish themselves from just a regular person. So there's all those things go into that. So when you're seeing heavily made up people that look nice and pretty and they're telling you these things and it's up at the high sight line, all that stuff factors into acceptance. So
interesting.
So yeah, I know that's probably more than anybody wanted to hear about that, but that's why I wanted to start off with this book. The just any just general hypnotism book is a good start. I probably have about 20 different books that are all different versions of this kind of book.
Okay.
That are kind of entry-level books on hypnosis and just how it works. So anyway, and I have Confessions of a Dangerous Mind that I just finished the other day, standing by too.
Yeah, that was a great video.
Well, thank you. And I guess this does fit with mass media.
Right.
Chuck Barrett's, that was, I can just vaguely remember. That was like when I was really young. I was only like a toddler, maybe 4 or 5 years old tops when he was doing his thing. And I remember my older brothers and sisters talking about the Gong Show. And I remember
Yeah.
our elementary school had like a Gong Show themed talent show and all that. I having read the book and watched the movie, I'm still scratching my head about what exactly, like why did he write that book? Was it just another cash grab? Did he actually have some kind of ties? So I still have a giant cartoon question mark over my head about that.
Yeah, it's always been on my list of books I really want to read, and for whatever reason, I've just never gotten around to it. But it's such a strange story.
It is. It's like what motivates someone to write this? If it is a work of fiction, that really the only hook, if it is a work of fiction, is that it's just the shock value of the story, because it's not really even that well done of a spy novel. So there's just a lot of questions about why did he write it, and why did he write it when he wrote it? I mean, all these things. And which you had mentioned Blue Thunder, and I watched one of your videos on Blue Thunder the other day, and I really want to run that down now. So
it's on the internet. I don't know how easy it is to find a hard copy, but you can find it out there.
Might have to have a fundraiser or bake sale or something to raise some raise some money.
It's a really good. It's one of the best books I've read in a very long time.
And there's a lot of those kind of stories like that. There's another one that I have that, based on that, you would probably appreciate this, and I hope the viewers are getting something out of this as we go all over the place about books. But there's one, I think it's Substantial Evidence. I think that's what it's called, Substantial Evidence, or something to that effect, by Hubbard. The guy's last name is Hubbard. And it was a case that happened in Lubbock, Texas, of a corrupt DA. And it's amazing. The dude is still out there practicing law. I think his name is Travis Ware. And he has all but scrubbed this from the interweb. Outside of this book, there's not much out there on it. But that is one of those cases where when you read what all the guy did, it's mind-blowing. And all this was happening when I was living in Lubbock in the early 90s. So when I read the book, I was like, holy crap. I remember like some of this stuff being in the news, and it's crazy. It has all kinds of but it's one of those things that I think it's important to read that to see where organized crime bleeds over into the public. It's like that's one of those things that's usually kept behind closed doors, but every now and then it gets so corrupt and so obvious that it makes it into the regular news. And I think that Blue Thunder is kind of one of those cases where you have some of that stuff bubble over into the regular world, and then it becomes this point at which you can start to map out some of those other connections. But Travis Ware, he was a DA in Lubbock, Texas, and the way I first heard about this was I had a political science professor in this would have been like 95. And he was working on his doctorate in political science, and he had wrote his thesis on this guy. And one of our assignments, we had to read his thesis for our class. So he passed this out to us and had us read it all, and it was insane. And I remember like the corrupt medical examiner like swapping heads on bodies and like just insane stuff. Which this audience, I mean, any of you that dig into organized crime and all that, definitely check out that book. And I'll see if I can find, I think it's Substantial Evidence, and the guy's last name that wrote it is Hubbard. And he was a police officer that was a whistleblower against the DA. And then all hell broke loose when he turned on the guy. But fascinating case. But yeah, this guy, the fascinating thing about that, the way I heard about it, was the guy that our political science professor had actually studied it, and this was just a couple of years out when he was telling us about it. And I remember he was a pretty down-to-earth guy, and he was like, this is crazy stuff. Like, he's like, if we didn't have the documents to back this up and the autopsy reports, you would never believe this stuff had really happened.
Wow.
And at the time, I was only like 22, 23 or so then. I was just like, crazy, whatever. And then, and I didn't really put it together until years later. I remembered him talking about that, and I was looking into some corruption cases and all, and I was like, I need to look into that again, and found that book. So, so now another couple of good ones on, and some of these are a little bit dated. They're more kind of a time capsule to see kind of how people are looking at some of these things a while back. This is Cal Lassen. I think I'm saying his name right. Culture Jam.
Okay.
I'm not putting that up right. And this is from, I think it's from 1999. Let me just double check. I think my dad actually has my original copy of this because I liked it so much that I loaned it to my dad, and then I didn't get that copy back, so I had to go run down and get. I couldn't remember who I'd lent it to, so then I went and bought another one. So this was the first 1999, and then this edition was from 2000. So evidently was selling fairly well. But this guy published Adbusters magazine, which was a counterculture kind of thing, and that was one of the first websites I ever went to and was checking out about alternative press. Was their Adbusters website. But he talks about in this, the thing that kind of blew my mind when I read this back in, I think I read this either in very late 2000 or spring of 2001. The thing that got me with this was he was talking about basically influencers before influencers were a thing. And talking about kids being recruited on college campuses that were kind of the cool in kids and being paid to wear certain clothes, use certain products to, support these certain brands. And so in that respect, he was definitely way ahead of his time talking about that influencer culture. And he gets into a lot of the psychology too of what keeps you riveted to a television. And that's something too. That's another one of those kind of like psychological, kind of the mechanics of it, of how television keeps your attention, that once you know it, it's a lot easier to kind of to push it away. But there's something called a technical event, or it's sometimes referred to as a jolt. And I don't know if you've looked into that, but what it is, and that's the thing, like with us doing this, like no one can ever accuse us of using technical events because we're two dudes on a screen talking. But a technical event is anytime something happens on screen that you can't do that can't happen in your normal vision. So if a title suddenly pops up, a lower third pops up, that's a technical event. Or if suddenly my side of the screen suddenly cuts and switches to the pyramids in Egypt for a location shot of that, and then switches back to me, that's a technical event. Or suddenly the camera zooms in or zooms out, all those things that are physically impossible for you, the viewer, to do as you're just taking in the world around you. So every time there's a technical event, if it's done properly, that activates your fight or flight sense. So you say, there's a part of your brain that goes, something happened that's really important. And if I don't pay attention to it, it could actually be dangerous. So if you use technical events spaced at the right timing, it basically is a continual jolt on somebody's psyche to keep them focused on the screen, because it's like seeing something like right out of the corner of your eye. You're seeing things that your subconscious knows are unnatural. So you say something is important that's about to happen, and I have to prepare, I have to plan for it, and I have to keep watching. And that's one of the reasons why you'll find yourself watching a show sometimes that you're like, why am I watching this? Like the show I actually sat down to watch was over like an hour ago, and now I'm watching a rerun of something that I had Three's Company or something I had no interest in, but here I am watching it. And that's typically, those are the technical events that keep you riveted. And that's also, you'll notice the rate of technical events. So the number of cuts between things, the jump cuts and things like that, will just about double or triple when in regular broadcast television, when it goes from just a regular scene in a movie or a TV show to a commercial. because now there's a price on your attention span. Like now there is a dollar sign attached to keeping you riveted to that. So like YouTube ads, any of that kind of stuff, you just get bombarded with those technical events so that you stay focused on the screen. So again, that's one of those things. Once you know what it is that you're seeing, it's a lot easier to pull away and break that. So, and that's one of the things that's also discussed in this gym, 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television.
Oh, neat.
By Jerry Mander, which apparently is his actual name. I remember the whole time I read this, that was bothering me. I'm like, this has got to be a pseudonym.
What was the name? I can't read it there.
Jerry Mander.
Jerry Mander.
Yeah,
okay.
as in like Jerry Mander. Like, surely this is like can't actually be the dude's name, but it is. And this is from, I think it's from 1978. Yeah, 77 originally, and then this is from 78. Excellent book. This is another one that's easy to find, and you can find it used in a lot of the like media and the media studies section of like half price books. But it breaks down 4 very solid arguments for why television cannot be rehabilitated. Just the medium of television will always be given over to autocratic control. Like it's always going to be a top-down medium. And things like, that's my one thing with like, thanks to platforms like YouTube. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you, Google. We do have the ability to put up stuff like this and have a live feed with, people commenting and that sort of thing, which does make it a lot easier to produce material where people are actually engaged. And which is why our benevolent overlords took away the comment section on a lot of videos a few years ago, because the comment section messes up that party real quick. As soon as you can say like, nope, not buying it. I don't know if you remember that during COVID, just about every major broadcaster that had a YouTube presence, all of them took their comment section down.
Well, I remember
it went sideways.
Yeah, I mean, I remember just not that long ago, all of like the main news sites, like CNN.com, had a comment section, and you could read comments on, Fox News had comment section.
Not buying it.
Yeah, and they took that down pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think I tell my kids this all the time, like, enjoy the internet. As much as people like ourselves are frustrated with some of the stuff, it's like, I think my kids are going to see an era where a lot of what we're seeing now will be seen as the golden age of the internet, where a lot of this kind of stuff was possible. A lot of more free dialogue was there to be had, where I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's something that happens that keeps that from going sideways too much. But yeah, I hope that doesn't happen. But I could easily see things happening where there's a clamp down with the digital ID and all that kind of stuff that makes it a lot harder for people to comment and do things.
Well, kind of to that point, it's always
cameo.
Oh, the clock, yeah. It's always interesting because I like to listen to a lot of older news broadcasts, and not news broadcasts, but like Mae Brussel and some researchers like that from the 80s and the 70s. And it's just amazing like how few people that they actually reached, or how small their audience was, because there wasn't, like, to your point, there wasn't something like YouTube. Like they were, like, she was literally making copies of these tapes and addressing all the envelopes herself and sending them out to people like directly to their houses. Like that was the only way to get your message out then. So the internet, I mean, it's just incredible how much the internet has changed everything.
Well, in fall of 1991 was when I first heard like some of the UFO lectures and things like that. And I mentioned this before. My dad was working for a telecommunications company at the time that a lot of the guys he worked with were former military. And this was in the early days of fax machines and things like that. And these guys were all faxing around to each other a lot of alternative press kind of stuff. But it was some pretty dark stuff about like government takeover, like New World Order stuff. And I still have a few of those old fax things that my dad gave me. He always called it chewing gum for the mind. He's like, I don't really take this too seriously. Here, kid, you can go read it. And at one point, he got one of those cassette tapes, not from Mae Brussel, but from, who was the hour at the time? Bill Cooper.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll never forget listening to that because, that was up until I listened to his tape. I had never heard anything like that. Like, that was just something that did not make it into outside of, I'm old enough to remember when we had like 4 or 5 channels, period. Like there was not 500 channels. There was 4 or 5, and that was it. And
even CNN is, that was like 1980. It's not even that old,
comparatively young by media standards. So,
and it's just crazy to me to think that like really before that there was not a 24-hour news station. Like, the news you had to wait around until 5:30 in the afternoon to.
This is what happens when you get to be older. You remember things like news signing off at night and just going to static, until like 6 in the morning. And my kids still can't believe that there was a time when, there was like a blackout. Like you hit the end of you like literally ran out of internet or out of television. So, but hearing Bill Cooper on that cassette, that was kind of mind blowing. And that was back when. We had no way to. A lot of people still hadn't seen the Zapruder film. So when he described the Zapruder film of the driver turning around and shooting Kennedy, I think that's what gave that theory legs, was the fact that you didn't have the ability to just pull up the Zapruder film and watch it for yourself and see. So it took me a few years to actually have the Zapruder film handy, where I was like, oh, wait a second, no, that's not. I'm not seeing that. But that whole era of fax machine stuff and old VHS tapes and that I still have a few of those. My ex-wife met Ted Gunderson, and I think I have some of his stuff on VHS, and I have some of his original books from when my wife met him and ex-wife met him and got all that. That I wish I could have met him, because there's a lot of stuff I would have liked to have asked him if I had ever met him in person. But, especially about the McMartin preschool case. So moving right along, we have, again, getting farther into it here, toxic sludge is good for you, and trust us, we're experts. And both of these are by the same guys, Sheldon Rampton and John Stauber. But that's a distinct enough title. If you look up Toxic Sludge is Good for You, that's an easy one to find. But those are, I got both of these after hearing these guys interviewed on NPR on, I think it was the Diane Rehm show. And I was blown away with the stuff they were talking about, public relations companies. I was just like, I'd never heard any of that kind of stuff before. And again, this would have been like 2000, 2001. And one of the things that blew me away was the whole deal about the Hill and Knowlton and the incubator baby story. And then seeing seeing how many times public relations companies steer these major events in history, and they made no bones about it. They don't try to, Hill and Knowlton doesn't like try to hide that.
No,
they're proud of it. It's like, hey, look what we did. We got all of y'all
so powerful that we started a war.
So that both of these are excellent. And the sad thing about these, I seriously doubt a lot of these authors that tend to be a little bit more on the progressive end of the political spectrum. A lot of these guys would probably never write this stuff again, because you saw in the whole with Trump coming into office in 2016, there was this really odd, it was like our culture had been taken out of the box and broken and then repacked and never to be the same again. And there are so many people I saw that just, if Trump said it, it was, Trump took on a, like Emmanuel Goldstein kind of role in mass media, like from 1984. This whole idea of if Trump says it, you know it's bad. So if Trump gets on the air and says, you should all go out and drink clean water, then, dang it, I'm going to go drink out of a pond.
Yeah, there's a lot of funny memes. There's a lot of funny memes out there. He'll say something and people will make, memes about it.
Was there recently
Tylenol
with like Tylenol?
Yeah.
And when my wife told me about that, I was like, surely not. Surely nobody would actually do that. And then, that's one of those things. It's hard to gauge how much people are actually doing that. But sadly, I then saw some of people I knew posting about that. I'm like, oh, no, please, no. But I think we saw a really strange moment happen there with the culture where, with the advent of Trump, it really polarized people to a point that it became these very clear lines of, if this guy says it, I can't do it. I can't believe it. I can't think it. It's off limits. And, then we saw through COVID how that, if you said something about ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, all those things, you got shut down really quick.
Yeah.
So it's really unfortunate because, again, with guys like this that were writing about this stuff and doing so in a way that was really pulling back the curtains on both sides of the political spectrum, of the left and the right, a lot of people don't want to do that anymore. Heaven forbid I uncover the dirt on what I consider to be my team.
Yeah, right.
It's like, no, I don't. I'm not so loyal to. I'm loyal to truth. I'm loyal to things that are true and good. But I'm not going to just cheer for a team because they wear the color jersey I like. I think that's madness.
Hey, I was curious about those books. Do they talk about? Because one of the public relations cases that I'm really interested in learning more about is, I think it was BP Oil, and they basically hired a public relations company because at the time they were getting a lot of flack about all the pollution they were causing and all the oil and whatnot that was going into the ocean, and so they hired a public relations firm to kind of like put the onus on individuals, so like you and me. And that's how the whole that's how the whole recycling movement and like living green, like that whole thing was a public relations campaign, just to make
It's not shocking me. I'm not seeing it in here. I see Bristol Myers Squibb and I see British Columbia Forest Alliance, but British Petroleum is not.
Yeah, I know there's
here, but no, there's a lot of some of the cases in here are very much akin to that in these what they call the AstroTurf movements. Creating these fake movements that look like grassroots but are not.
You aren't at all. Yeah.
So and then of course I got Propaganda by Edward Bernays, and that was the thing. This was a good kind of layman's introduction to Edward Bernays and his place in that world of public relations. So then of course I had to go and find the actual Propaganda book, and I have some Vance Packard's books too, but I don't know where they are right off the top of my head. But Vance Packard wrote a bunch of stuff like that about manipulation of opinion, and a lot of his was kind of like the anti-Edward Bernays. Like he was big in, I want to say in the late 60s or early 70s or so, but look up Vance Packard and you'll see he did a lot of stuff on exposing propaganda kind of stuff, and the way corporations manipulate people and that sort of thing. But
interesting.
So moving right along, we have Don't Believe It. This is by Alexandra Kitty, How Lies Become News. And this actually has some really good information. This is by Disinfo Press, which is a real mixed bag. They put out some really good stuff sometimes. They put out some real turkeys, but this is actually a pretty good breakdown of how media works and stuff to watch for. And again, this is one of those books that would it be written now? Would it get published now? I don't know. But overall, the reason I think this made it through the out into the mainstream press was it's more just general rules for what to watch for in mass media. So some good tips in there. Still holds up pretty well. And I do have a few things dog-eared in here. There is no forensic evidence to support the claim. The target group seemed to have superhuman strength in numbers, even though they have a small military. Crazy.
Yeah.
And there was, okay, and I'm getting down into, I've got some down here that I'm going to read a little bit from, but now this one is near and dear to my heart, and this is one that if you definitely go get this one. I know I sound like a pitch man for Barnes and Noble or something with these books. I don't know who published this originally, but it's Into the Buzzsaw. I don't know if y'all could see that with the light on it. If it's Into the Buzzsaw by, and I'm not going to say this lady's name right at all. Somebody said she had passed recently. It's Christina Borgeson, I think. Christina Borgeson. And this, I believe, is also from like 2002 by Prometheus Books. But this one is all about, it's a compilation of several reporters several journalists that all give their experience of kind of touching the third rail of journalism, of reporting stories that weren't supposed to be reported, or reporting honestly about certain issues that weren't supposed to be reported on, and how it killed their career. Gary Webb is in this. There's several people that you'd recognize in here. That in Christina Borgeson, her claim to fame was she got in trouble over reporting on the flight. I think it was TWA 800 or whatever, the flight that off Long Island that went down. And originally people reporting that it was shot down with a missile, and then it became this weird fuel tank accident where they said the front of the plane came off and it went up, and they're like, that's what you saw. It was actually the plane climbing really fast, and you mistook that for a missile. All the witnesses that were watching it, you mistook that as a missile. It was actually a 747 that just started to climb really fast and then crashed. So I think that's what they claimed, that it was like the front of the plane came off and then went up higher, so drastic that it mimicked, a supersonic missile. And then it exploded once it got to apex of its deal. Or whatever. Wow. It's one of those, it's like, well, hey, the experts are telling me that that's what happened. So far be it from me.
That'd be a good video in the future, like 10 suspicious plane crashes or.
Oh yeah. There's. I know that's definitely a top. That's definitely one of the. And then Flight 007 in Korea.
Yeah, I did a video about that. Yeah, Larry McDonald. Yeah. I haven't gotten into that as much as I should, but yeah, that's very strange. There's one really tied into Watergate. E. Howard Hunt's wife died on it. It was a plane into Chicago. It crashed on approach into O'Hare, and like E. Howard Hunt's wife was on it, and a whole bunch of people kind of associated with Watergate. There's a lot of really plane crashes are pretty interesting.
That would be that would definitely be a good list to start of the especially the larger plane crashes, because a lot of those that happened in back, especially when I was a kid in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, it was harder to see who was on the plane. Unless it was some huge celebrity, you had no way to know who was on that plane. And so now we have the ability you can look up the passenger list and start checking people out and find out pretty quick. But anyway, this is basically just all these different journalists. This has Jane Aker, Greg Palast, or Maurice Murad. No, I'm not getting these guys' names right. David E. Hendricks, Philip Weiss. There's a total of 18 chapters, but Jane Aker, and I hope I'm saying her name right, but she and her husband, they were a husband-wife reporting team that was reporting on the bovine growth hormone in that was being given to cows to help stimulate milk production. And when they were putting this story together for this Fox affiliate down in Florida, they got the story ready to go. And when they were about to run it, the Fox lawyers said, hey, Monsanto would like us to change some things in this story. And they said, okay, well, we'll take a look. Well, what they wanted to change would mean lying. So they're like, no, we're not cool with that. So they kept going back and forth trying to get the story changed and meet the deadline because they were already running ads for it. And finally, it came down to they just refused to run it and said, basically, if you don't make these changes, we're going to fire you. And they got the Fox affiliate to say in writing that basically asking them to lie. Wow. And so when they fired them, that gave them whistleblower status. And they sued Fox. And this was before Fox News. This was a Fox affiliate station down in Florida. They sued them for being asked to lie. And they won. They won on the grounds that, that they were being asked to lie. They had all the paperwork to show that Monsanto and Fox were colluding to keep this story out of the news. And then this is where it gets really crazy. And this is the part that kind of blew my mind and did a hard restart on my brain, because I think one of the hardest things for people to accept is to realize that mass media is as coordinated as it is. Like that you could have CNN and Fox News that are actually working toward the same goal. Yeah. I think that's really hard for people to accept, because it's kind of like, really, my stepdad and his ex-wife, really, they're working together? Like, I don't see it. They hate each other. Yeah. It's like, well, do they really? Well, so once they won like a $400,000 settlement. But before it could get paid out, Fox News appealed the decision, and joined in the appeal, they had Belo Corp and Newsweek and all these major media outlets joined them in their appeal and threw their legal weight behind their appeal. And they were able to reverse the court's decision, to appeal and reverse the decision on the grounds that there is no law requiring a news broadcaster to tell the truth. And once you know that precedent, it's like, then you realize, there is no imperative for mass media to tell you the truth. And then again, when you see all the people that joined into that, all the corporations that joined in on that appeal with Fox, you realize they're thick as thieves when it comes to defending their ability to lie. So, and then of course the Telecommunications Act of 1996. If you're my age, you remember, that was a big tipping point with mass media, of just having going from all these local independent stations, because what that did was it changed how many news stations, how many television stations, and how many radio stations you could own. Yeah. Before that, there was a finite amount of control any one corporation could have. Now, that doesn't mean that prior to 1996, everything was free and fair and everybody was telling the truth, but it was a lot harder to coordinate between all these things. Yeah, this was one of the books I was going to recommend here, The Media Monopoly by Ben Bagdikian. Have you ever heard of this? No. It's a really good book. So this guy, Ben Bagdikian, I think I should have looked this up, but I think he was the ombudsman for the Washington Post. Okay. And he wrote this book in 1983, early 1983. And he just did this massive study on who owns the media. So he looked at, whoever owns radio stations, whoever owns TV stations. And this is all, in the early 80s, and no one had ever really done like a study like this or anything. And so he found out that there was about 50 companies that owned everything, basically everything.
every magazine, newspaper, TV station, radio station. And he released this book, and it really caused caused a stir, because most people were just totally unaware of that at this time. And the interesting thing about this book is he's released like a second, third, fourth edition of it every like 5 or 6 years since 1983, and the number just keeps shrinking and shrinking.
Oh yeah,
And it went from like, and he talks about it in the intro for every edition, how it goes from like 50 corporations who controlled practically everything, and then 5 years later he released the second edition, and it was down to like 32 or 31, something like that. 5, 6 years later, released another edition, and it was down to 14. And then like you mentioned, when the Telecommunications Act of 1996 happened, that's when the mergers, like the just absolutely massive mergers, started happening.
And the big one that a lot of people, if you're my age or around my age, you'll remember this: a clear channel communication station. That was when you got to hear that a lot.
Yeah,
Was Clear Channel. Clear Channel bought up like most of the billboards, most of the radio stations, and most of the television stations. But mainly Clear Channel was really big in radio and billboard advertising. So you'll still see those little you'll see the little Clear Channel deal at the bottom of a lot of billboards. But one of the things I found interesting about that was Clear Channel did that and bought up all these. I mean, they went crazy buying up all these little radio stations. And leading up to 9/11. After 9/11, a lot of those got just faded away. A lot of those just went away. Like there was this huge proliferation of radio stations right up until 2002 or so, and then they all started dropping like flies. Yeah. And if you go and really start then looking at the way that all went down, you see they all serve their purpose. There's no need for all that now. And I think what we saw through COVID, where the film industry and television industry, there was a lot of that, a lot of very dirty money being pumped in to push certain agendas in Netflix series and all these other shows. And once that was out there, once they accomplished what they needed, then there's no need to keep paying for it. So that's why we saw this implosion of film and television, because all that money dried up. It was like, we got what we wanted. Thank you. We'll see you later. So, but yeah, the Clear Channel was that one in Lubbock, and I was living in Lubbock when that happened. And I remember almost feeling telepathic because they played such a predictable schedule of songs. I was working a lot in my workshop making molds and stuff, and I would hear on the radio, as the radio was playing, I'd be like, I could almost tell what song was coming up. And I'm like, how am I guessing? And I finally realized they're playing such a consistent pattern of songs that your subconscious is cataloging it. Yeah. But because there was no variety. Variety went out the window. But when I moved to Dallas in '99, I'd moved away to Lubbock for a while and then moved back to Dallas in '99. And when I got back to Dallas, there was this explosion of 70 stations. There was probably about 3 different 70 stations in Dallas. And there was all these, I think there was at least maybe a couple of classic rock stations, a bunch of top 40 stations. But then after 9/11, and it was blamed on all the Enron scandal and all the economic collapse and all that. But the real thing was there was no need for it. Like all that saturation of information that was required for things like 9/11 to be done, it was over. The mission accomplished, so you can yank that out now. So I would like to go. I wish there was a way to look up how many radio stations there were, like in summer of 2000 versus summer of 2002.
Really? Yeah.
There's a pronounced change.
Huh. Yeah, I can see it.
But anyway, so yeah, this is a good one just because it's all about reporters running up against that invisible wall of you will not report on this thing. So, and this was a good one for me because that was one of the hardest things for me to get my mind around when I first started digging into a lot of these corruption topics and parapolitical stuff, was this idea that there could be this level of coordination in mass media, because everybody wants to believe that, well, if it's a big story, who doesn't want to report that? Who doesn't want to be the guy running that story and being the guy that tells the thing?
Right.
But when you see how controlled that is, you realize, no, you're not going to be the guy that says the thing on the nightly news. That's not, if you're not supposed to say it, you ain't going to say it.
Yeah.
So now this one is, I'm curious if you pull this up on Amazon, what kind of results you'll get. I haven't looked this one up in a while, but this is Television and Antisocial Behavior by Milgram and Shotland, and I think that is the Milgram of the other somebody else, I forget the other Milgram study that he is famous for, but this one is from 1973, and this is, I cannot stress the importance of this enough. I mean, this is really, you don't need to read the book to just understand the study and the impact of it and the implications of it. Do you find it?
I think this is it. Stanley Milgram.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And what's it going for now?
Oh,
not too bad.
Okay, yeah, $42. Yeah.
$55. Okay, that's reasonable. The main thing that study shows is that the main thing in there is they do this experiment where this test audience is shown this film where the main guy in the film sees this like donation box, one of those old plexiglass boxes that people put money into for like United Way or whatever. But the guy sees that and breaks it open and takes the money out. And that's part of the plot in this movie they watch. But it's not but they film the movie like 3 different ways. In one, it's a negative way where he breaks it and steals the money, but then he gets punished for it and it's shown as a bad thing. And then they do a kind of a neutral showing of it where it's not really judged one way or the other, it just happens and the guy takes the money and goes or whatever. But it's not, and I'm paraphrasing all this, of course, and then I think they show it in almost a positive light of where they're promoting it, of this guy taking the money. And no matter how it was presented, it put an idea into their head that wasn't there before. And the way they tested this was when the people went to go get paid for this study that they were part of, and they didn't realize that going to get paid was part of the study. And the office that they went to was closed. But there in the office was one of those donation boxes that had money. So here they are expecting to get paid. This is little boxes full of cash. Why not break it and take the money? And they set it up in several different ways in there, but basically showing, and I think they also filmed it in a way, clock finished. I think my poor clock's off by a digit, but I think they also filmed a version where they didn't steal, like it was the box that might have been there, but it just nobody steals from it.
Yeah.
But the point was, no matter how it was presented, good or bad or neutral, it put an idea in their head that they would not have thought about before. So even when it's presented in 100% negative light of the guy does this bad thing and he gets punished for it, it still puts an idea in someone's head that did not exist there before. And now the odds of them mimicking that act go up exponentially. And when you think about the implications of that, it's huge, because you can look at it from a more positive, morally positive standpoint of being like, gee, we got to be careful about what we show in film. Or you can look at it in a very dark way and a very manipulative way and say, hey, if we want to introduce certain ideas, it doesn't matter if they're presented as negative or positive. The fact remains we can show something that is 100% in negative light, but it's going to put an idea into the general population's head that wasn't there before. And when you start thinking about a lot of trends in pop culture that have started that way, and a lot of these TikTok trends, all of that is based on that. Like back when my oldest daughter was in high school, there was the whole TikTok trend of like encouraging vandalism. And then there was the whole like Kia thing of like certain models of Kias that could be hot wired with like a USB deal. But there's all these little hacks that I was like, there's no way that some kid just stumbled onto that and did this. Like this had to come from someone who knew and then proliferated it. Because typically if you put up, like if I put up instructions on how to build a destructive device, we'll use that euphemism, a destructive device, and now the ATF has definitely joined the chat, that could potentially be pulled off YouTube for violation of terms and conditions and all, for explaining in detail how to do this thing. So when they started having these trends of like on social media, especially like TikTok, giving explicit instructions for antisocial acts, I'm like, something's not right there.
Yeah.
That does not seem like a genuinely grassroots thing to happen.
Right.
So again, I was a child. I was a stupid 14-year-old, and you know, we did a lot of dumb things, but there was a lot of dumb things we did because we saw somebody else do the dumb thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's this funny, it's not really funny, but it's an interesting video that's kind of talked about a lot online. It's at this like outdoor concert, and like a band is playing on stage. It's this big like grassy area, and there's this one guy who's just out there by himself, just dancing, just
going crazy.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. And then he slowly builds a whole social movement.
Yeah. And then like everybody's just kind of laughing at him, and he's just going crazy. And then somebody else joins him. So now there's two of them. Then somebody else joins, and then it's just like this mob of people. Everybody's dancing, and it's like that one person started the whole thing, and everybody just kind of, you know, jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah,
but it took a while for them to like actually jump in. You know,
there's pallets of bricks left downtown. What can we do with these? I wonder what we can do with that. Now, at some point, I'm going to have to make a video about this, because during that whole summer of love, that starting with I think it was Labor Day weekend, or is that Memorial Day weekend of 2020. That's where things left the rails. And I started doing screenshots of a lot of the stuff I was seeing on social media, because there was a lot of very specific instructions about how to use face paint to cheat facial recognition software. And here's a home remedy for protecting against tear gas. And here's how to use a tampon to plug up a bullet wound. And things like that were being passed around by people I knew that had no interest in that. And I'm like, why did you suddenly become a conduit for literal armed revolution?
Yeah.
So there's definitely some really strange stuff going on there. And somewhere, because around that time I was watching all that unfold, there's a CIA sabotage manual that I have somewhere around here that came out through, or it's some kind of deal about revolution or counterculture kind of stuff, but it was being passed around to the in Central America during the Iran-Contra thing.
Oh yeah.
It was all about how to manage these situations like that. And a lot of it was very, very much in the BLM, very similar to like a lot of the Antifa stuff.
Yeah.
And I need to find it and review that, because at the time I ran that down, I was like, holy crap, this is like, we're seeing the CIA playbook, but we're seeing it at home. It's a home game this time.
Yeah. Well, there was an old magazine that I see referenced sometimes. It was called Soldier of Fortune.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Soldier of Fortune. Well, um, that funny thing about Soldier of Fortune is I would love to find some of these old issues, but Soldier of
I'm pretty sure
Fortune,
they're on the Internet Archive.
probably so.
Yeah.
I've ordered a few on eBay. I'll look
Yeah.
for lots of old magazines sometimes because some of those have some pretty crazy articles in them.
Yeah.
But the guy Walter Boer, who wrote Operation Mind Control, he put classified ads in several publications, and one of them, I believe, was Soldier of Fortune, and that was where he was able to find some of the like mind control survivors from the Vietnam era.
Oh,
And I forget what his ad was asking people, but it was something about gaps in their memory. And but that was one of the places he put out his little net to see who he could find. So I got three more here. And this is one. This one's not specifically on media as much as just this is all about the war, all the stuff that's been happening in Syria, and this is Subverting Syria: How CIA, Contra gangs, and NGOs manufacture, mislabel, and market mass murder. Mm-hmm. And by Tony Cartolucci and Niall Bowie, and excellent book. It's a quick read, but so much. This is so important to read because this is on the back. It has this little deal: Special Forces Unconventional Warfare table about guerrilla actions and how this stuff works, and it shows a whole game plan for how you go and create these death squads and use them to foment revolution, and then you get what you have: the complete collapse in Syria or Libya. And really, this is basically what we're seeing now in Ukraine, is the same kind of thing, the same MO with the Maidan coup back in 2014, which a lot of that we weren't really paying attention to because it didn't really hit home until 2022. But I would highly recommend people read this, and then the situation in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, makes a whole lot more sense, because then you see that this is the whole Maidan coup thing and all that is basically the exact same game plan, just played out in a European country for a change.
That's interesting, because in that Media Monopoly book, one thing they also talk about is how like the language, like I think the title of that was like mislabeling or something, that Syria book.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about, in the Media Monopoly book, they talk about how they specifically talk about the word genocide and how like certain
a strong word there.
Yeah.
You only use that word when it's again, for my age, I remember in '92, this was right after. Now it's a lot easier. You go back and you look at this, and a lot of this stuff makes a lot more sense, that what was actually going on. But you had the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, and then not even a year goes by, and you start having all these crazy things like the Serbia and Yugoslavia, and you start having all these weird, again, just like this, all these weird little uprisings popping up, overthrowing all these former Soviet satellite countries. And I'm not saying that any of those guys were great guys. I don't know one way or the other. There's so much propaganda. It's really hard to sift through and figure out what, if how much of that is real or not. But all that really started in '92 and continued really right through '99 with the bombing of what was it?
Oklahoma City?
No, NATO. When NATO was bombing that, what was it?
Slobodan.
Slobodan Milosevic and all that. But you might remember this, where the U.S. bombed the Chinese embassy, and that was a big deal. The Chinese were not happy about it at all. Killed everybody inside. They were like, oh, shucks, we just missed. But it was right after the Chinese government had expressed concern about what was going on over there. And then, of course, a smart bomb hits their embassy, because as you do, sometimes you just, one of those smart bombs just you turn stupid on its way down.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was that was one of those where people were worried that could, at the time, because I think that was like spring of 1999, that could, boil over into something much bigger. But you start seeing that was that whole, gradually chipping away at all those former Soviet satellite countries and making sure that they couldn't become strong democracies or strong democratic republics that could actually, nobody wanted a state, these stable states, and heaven forbid, stable states that would unite together in, any kind of singular culture or anything like that. So there's been an effort to break all that up for a while. Now, this is Mind Control, World Control by Jim Keith, which, again, not exclusively media, but this one has some good stuff in it about this. Jim Keith is one of those writers, you either love him or hate him. His writing style is a little frustrating at first because he kind of writes in this disjointed, like, chunks of information. And there's sometimes he'll write something in just like a couple of sentences and be done with it. And you're like, dude, that's a whole book right there. Like, there's so much that you just said. Like, I want to know, where'd you hear that? How'd you get that information? But he just kind of moves along. And sadly, Jim Keith passed away, I think, in either 97 or 99, somewhere in there. He had an accident at the Burning Man festival, and then he went in for knee surgery to remove like a blood clot or something, and he died on the operating table. Weird.
Supposedly he told his family, like, if I go into the hospital, they're going to kill me.
And didn't make it out. So Jim Keith is definitely one of those but lots of good information on this, on just a wide variety of topics. So again, have you read much of Jim Keith's stuff?
I have, yeah. He I don't know if I've read that one in particular, but I know I've read at least a couple. He wrote a book on the Gemstone File, which is one of my favorite.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And he wasn't a big fan of the Gemstone File. He kind of, but it was still a pretty good book. But that's one of my favorite topics. I was going to actually mention that earlier when we were talking about how hard it was for people to reach others, back before the internet. Because that's how the Gemstone File kind of went viral in a sense. Is it just got passed around, like people would print out a copy of it.
Yeah, I definitely need to revisit that, because I think there's a lot of smoke and possibly some fire.
I did about an hour and a half long video on the Gemstone File, and really just kind of it's interesting to look at it just because, and like have like internet, like newspaper archives and magazine archives that you can just search for on the internet and kind of try to verify some of the stuff, because a lot of the stuff that they mention, I mean, it sounds totally preposterous, or it sounds pretty hard to believe, but then you kind of look through a newspaper archives, you're like, oh my God, that did happen.
Well, one of the things he kind of shoots down in this is the Monarch mind control program. He's big on MK Ultra, but says Monarch doesn't exist. And at the time, this is when Kathy O'Brien and Mark O'Brien were first making their rounds about that. And he was very wary of them. Now, I'm kind of torn on that. I think there's definitely something to the whole Monarch program. And I think if he had been around a little bit longer, and a lot more has surfaced, especially in the last 20 years. But I definitely think with the Kathy O'Brien, that's a topic for another video, but I think the Kathy O'Brien, Mark Phillips, that's it. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of weird stuff, especially with Mark. He definitely gave off the handler kind of vibe. And like I said, that's a we need to do a whole thing on MK Ultra and mind control on its own.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, I have By Silence Betrayed. And this is all about, abuse of children of the, naughty variety. I don't want to get us deep here by saying too many things here. But this has a really good section on the McMartin preschool case. And for those that subscribe to the satanic panic, it was all satanic panic. That wasn't a thing. When you read the actual stuff about the case, quotes from the people, the victims' families, how everybody was talking about it, and the actual way it really went down, and not the media narrative, you see that it was a totally different thing that happened versus what the media told everybody. So that the whole McMartin preschool case is one of those that could not have gone down the way it did without the help of the media.
Yeah.
And
same with the Franklin.
Yeah, the Franklin scandal. Yeah, same way. There's no way that stuff could have happened without a very compliant media that conveniently did not look at certain things.
And was named the publisher of the Omaha, World Herald was named.
I can't remember his name now.
Harold Anderson, I think. I think his name was Harold Anderson. Yeah.
He was named, and but yeah, that the McMartin preschool case is one that I think is, if you just go back and look at a lot of the original material, it's pretty damning. And then in that also, and I was looking for this and I couldn't find it, I think it's Satan's Silence. And it's a debunking book about ritual abuse. That ritual abuse is all made up, and it's all this fanciful, crazy, stuff, and it's all fiction.
Yeah.
And this was written as an attack on a very specific case that happened in Washington State. And the interesting thing about that case was the guy, I think he was a sheriff. He worked for the sheriff's department or something, and I can't remember what rank he held, but it was pretty high up. And he confessed to doing all this stuff to his daughter. And but then later, he was encouraged by his lawyer to retract his confession. There's a lot of weird back and forth about that. And there's some really weird stuff that seems like you had a lot of people with hypnotic blocks in their heads. But the thing about that book that I wanted to have handy for this is in the very end of the book, and I talk about this in my review, at the very end, there's a part where he says, because up until that, as you're reading through the book, you are under the impression that you're reading transcripts of the actual court dialogue and stuff that actually occurred between people. At the very end, they reveal, and I think it's actually in the epilogue or something, where he reveals that the way he wrote the book, he had to kind of fictionalize some of this content so for the flow of the story. And then he gives some examples. He says, for instance, and he takes this one passage and shows how he took the original transcript and adjusted it for the book. And when you read that example, you're like, holy crap, you totally changed it. You made the guy sound like he was doubting himself when he in fact was not. And that's a great example there of, it's hey, how many people are actually going to read all the way to that end of that book and read that epilogue and be like, oh, wait, what? So you basically made up some of this stuff that I thought was court transcripts.
Yeah.
And that is, it really made me wonder after reading that, how many times that kind of approach is done, and it's hidden in the fine print somewhere. Because there's several parts of that book where it really does make you start doubting stuff about the case. Because if you genuinely, if this is really presented, if this is really the way these people were talking to each other, then that would make sense. That would cast a lot of doubt. But then you get to the very end and you realize, oh, wait, so he totally changed up some of these quotes and rearranged stuff and chopped down some of the dialogue to, in order to, I forget how he words it, but he makes it sound like, it was necessary to make this all flow and, so it would all make more sense. And That's a funny thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, why not just present it as is? But so anyway, that one is, I think, Satan's Silence, and it's worth re-getting just just for that end part of the book. And I'm kicking myself now for not hunting that down beforehand. So anyway, so there you go. I
That's
know
good.
there's we're doing a live, and I hadn't seen anything pop up major with anybody saying anything like this guy's
Well,
a
so
hack.
it's kind of in the corner. I mean, I can basically choose and pick and choose like which ones. Actually, I was gonna mention a book here real quick.
Okay.
Let's see here.
By the way, this is just good old West Texas water here, not no alcohol. I like to do this stone cold sober here.
Have you ever heard of this Project
Yes.
Censored?
Okay, I'm glad you said, because that was actually in my pile somewhere. I had one of the Project Censored 17, book number 17, somewhere.
Okay.
Yes, and it's sad to me because I discovered that was one of my half-price books finds. That's, for those that don't know, Project Censored. I don't know what university puts it out, but it's a program by some college, the journalism department of some college, that puts that out, and they do one every year, and each one covers the previous year's news stories, and it's the top censored news stories from that year. And overall, they're pretty good, pretty balanced, right up until about 2016, 17 or so, and then it leaves the rails. And
Yeah.
and not horribly bad, but there's certain things that just don't get like. And I think the last one I got was one of the ones covering some of the period of COVID, and I was thinking like, man, like this should be like the expanded super edition, because there would be so much to cover.
Exactly. All 25, top 25 should be about that.
Yeah. So, but no, it was none of it was addressing any of the deceptive news practices during COVID. And after that, I was like, well, rest in peace. Project Censored. You had a good run. Yeah.
Well, even just some of the older versions, it seems like there's some, topics they don't really.
Oh yeah. There's definitely,
stay away from.
Definitely stay in their box.
Yeah.
But I think
there is some interesting stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it's the 2017 Project Censored book that has some stuff about 9/11, about Building 7. I can't remember which one. Yeah, and that surprised me.
Yeah, that is surprising.
So there were a few times where they would venture into some topics. You're like, whoa, I didn't expect you to go there. But yeah, it's unfortunate that they were pretty mainstream overall. I mean, they would cover some topics that were good fodder for if you wanted some good stuff to research. It was a good starting point, but it should not be considered the be all end all. But yeah, sadly, I think by 2019, 2020, I'd like to get maybe I'd go find another one now. They're pretty cheap to find after they've been out a while. You can buy them for just a couple of bucks on Amazon. But I have like every one of them, I think, going back about 20 years. So I've got a pretty good library of them. Because the older ones especially are a pretty good resource. It's just right up there to that point where the Trump era, that's when it turned stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, I started a few comments. I probably missed some good ones here, but video game, there's a lot of books out there about TV and everything, but I don't know if there's too many about like video games and the effect that those have. Or I don't know if you've encountered that anywhere.
I've never been really big into video games, so that's probably kept me from really digging into that. But that doesn't shock me at all. I mean, I've got a book that I reviewed years ago called On Killing, and I think it's by Grossman, but it's all about how people are conditioned to kill. and warfare. And I think there's some stuff on video games in that, like first-person shooter games and all that.
Yeah, sure.
It's been a while since I've read that, so don't quote me on that. But what does
Yeah.
that say? That's so interesting about the gaps in memory. The video on this. Oh, yeah, that was the guy Walter Boart who wrote Operation Mind Control, which I think was published in 77 or 78. And allegedly, that was one of the first times where supposedly the CIA came in and tried to buy up a lot of the books off the market. And it was one of the first kind of mainstream books. Definitely not the first book on mind control, but one of the first mainstream books that was about mind control programs and all that. And one of the reason Walter Boart wrote the book was one of his friends had come back from Vietnam. And when he came back, his brain was all messed up. He had these gaps in his memory of Vietnam. And he had these very specific memories that he could remember. But then there was these whole gaps where he just had these unexplained gaps in his memory of his time in the service. And allegedly, on paper, he was like a parts clerk, or I don't know if that's what it was exactly, but some kind of menial task, and didn't make any sense why this clerk would have these gaps in his memory. And so his friend wound up going to a hypnotherapist or somebody because he was having huge problems with his memory and all this. And the therapist or the hypnotist or whoever he was working with said, basically, your mind is screwed up. Like somebody has deliberately screwed with your head. And I can help you remember all the stuff that's in there, but that might mess you up more than if we just help you process through and forget. So I can the short version is I can help you just become a functioning member of society, or we can try to piece together all the stuff that's in your head. They said that could take many years, and it might mess you up even more to remember some of the stuff you remember. And he opted for the shorter deal. And that got Mr. Boart interested in mind control and what was being used that could do that to somebody's head. So that's where that. Debunking books are good because you can tell what is true about what. Yeah, that's you're not wrong. That is very true. I've got quite a few debunking books that yes, it is.
It sounds like you believe the opposite of whatever it says.
That you can use that to then look at when they're telling you, especially if they tell you, it's wrong thing to even consider this certain idea or whatever.
Yeah.
That then there might be something to that. But yeah.
And same with those debunking websites like Snopes and there's a couple of them like that.
Yeah, Snopes is in fact, that's why I went through a phase there where I was using Snopes exactly for that purpose, where I would use Snopes as kind of a starting point for some of my research, and especially on things like aspartame and stuff. So, whatever Snopes is saying, it's probably the opposite. So, let's say, what does the guest think of Michael Hoffman's books, The Secret Society, the sequel to the Twilight Language? Yeah, I think Hoffman's got a lot of good stuff. I don't have Twilight Language. At least I don't think I do. I do have Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare, and lots of good stuff in that. Hoffman is one of those guys who just talks a book, he's packs so much information, at least for my little walnut-sized brain. I'll read a little bit of it and have to put it down and take a break and read something else, because you wind up Googling like every few sentences, like, holy crap, this is crazy. And I've ordered so many other books because of Hoffman's work. Like, I'm trying to think but that for one of them I think of with the Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare is Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, and what he talked about in there. And after reading his section on that, I immediately ran out and got Childhood's End and had to read that. And I've got a review on my channel about that. But yeah, I think Hoffman's got a lot of good stuff. It's just, he's kind of like Jim Keith in that there's so much, there's a lot of stuff that you'd like to hey, back up, explain that a little bit more. He's one of those guys I'd love to interview. So Hoffman, if you're out there, maybe we could all throw down and have a mass deal here. I recently you mentioned the solder. Yeah. Okay. So the solder briefing. I'm not sure so there was he had Richard Sauter, Dr. Richard Sauter, the PhD. He had an old website, and his new website, he has a Substack called the Sauter. Hold on, let me see. But it might be the same thing under a different name now, I think. But the main thing is just look at and see if it's the same.
So who is Richard Sauter? What does he talk about?
Okay, let's see here. RichardSauter.substack.com is his Substack. So he researched a lot of stuff about his degree. His PhD is in political science, and he was the one digging into underground bases and a lot of secret government kind of stuff. This is one of his Kundalini tales. And,
okay. Yeah, I think you've mentioned him on.
Yeah, and really, really good stuff. And he's really good, almost to a fault, about staying away from speculating, saying I can prove X, Y, and Z, but anything beyond that, like he's very shy about coming right out and saying, like, here's what we know is happening here. He'll say, I've heard rumors of this, this, and this, but we don't really know for sure. And I have a lot of respect for him for that, because that whole genre of parapolitical books about underground bases and UFOs is full of people speculating, wild, crazy speculation with little proof. So he is definitely a breath of fresh air on that front, that he's pretty good about staying to just the facts. And he does does go into sometimes where he'll say, here's what I think might be happening, but pretty good about that. So, but yeah, that is Richard Sauter, PhD, and he has since moved to Ecuador.
Wow.
So yeah, he is down there in Ecuador now. What's that?
I have heard this story. There's an old lady who
taped thousands. Oh yeah. Yeah,
I heard that. Like the Internet Archive got her tapes, because I think she passed away somewhat recently.
Oh wow, that would be fascinating to go through. I mean, I would love to actually see some of that, and because
basically, I think they always said like she had 3 or 4 VCRs in her house,
yeah,
and like 3 or 4 TVs, and she would just run tapes constantly. And
one of the things that allegedly has been memory hold like that is McDonald's support for the Church of Satan. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but I remember my mom telling me about that was why she didn't want to patronize McDonald's, was because they donated money to the Church of Satan.
No kidding.
And this was my mom. We didn't have a TV. We didn't have any of that kind of stuff. But I forget how she had heard about that. But it was in a lot of people had heard that. There was actually allegedly a broadcast where they said as much out loud. So it wasn't like some kind of crazy urban legend. But man, it has been completely and totally scrubbed. So that's, again, one of those things I'd love to find more about that. But yeah, so that would be one of the things I'd love to look up and see if there is in fact a broadcast that says that, because I knew several people who had heard that, and I don't know where they would have heard it outside of, being broadcast somewhere. So.
Well, what do you say? You want to go through a few more and call tonight, or?
Yeah. Who else we got in there?
Okay, let's see here. I think I had a few more saved. This is I think we were talking about kind of the corporate control and.
Yeah, there's definitely I mean, all those old money families that run all that stuff. And that's something, from my just dealings with film and television on the supply side of it, people don't realize how controlled, how carefully managed film and television is. And the idea that in pop culture, the idea that just regular Joe public just rises up in the ranks because he's got a good voice and he came up with this awesome song, and now here he is singing to the world. That whole and Dave McGowan did a great job of dismantling a lot of that in Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. But that whole idea of that people just organically become movie stars or organically become rock stars, that is, you realize that is just complete and total fiction. When you realize, wait a second, they didn't even write that song. This guy wrote the song. This guy was chosen and groomed for this thing. And I think Milli Vanilli is a great example of when you get a crack in that facade, because those guys didn't even realize what they're playing along with. And I think they got thrown to the dogs because they very innocently were like, hey, we're just lip syncing. And they didn't think they were doing anything bad. They were just being honest. We're just the models that were hired to be the visual presence of these guys that were singing. You know, we thought everybody knew that. And it's like, everybody does know that. On this side of the curtain, you're not supposed to say that out loud. And there
was a funny like I guess meme you could say maybe a couple years ago where they listed out, they kind of like side by side compared John Lennon Imagine and some other like current song. I can't remember. It was like some Britney Spears song or something. And so the John Lennon Imagine was, the credits in the song was like written by John Lennon, produced by John Lennon, performed by John, like, everything was John Lennon. And then they showed like, this god awful Britney Spears song, and there was like 6 writers and like 7 producers and all these backup artists and everything.
Yeah, well, and that's where, and that I need to get more into looking at the Tavistock Institute.
Yeah,
that's where you get into some weird stuff with the Beatles. The Beatles are one of those bands I have not really looked into as much as I probably should. Because that was such a cultural phenomenon that you're like, okay, how much of that again is real, and how much of that is because one of the interesting things, what's his name in the air tonight, Phil Collins. Phil Collins, I remember on NPR one time they had this little human interest story about Phil Collins where they're like, oh, and he just happened to be one of the like screaming adoring fans with the Beatles. That was, and it's like, that's funny. And then he goes on to have his own music career, but he just happened to be this like screaming fan in these very specific videos, early videos of the Beatles.
Yeah,
I think I'm remembering that right. I'm not.
Just one of my recent videos, somebody recommended, I think it was John Coleman wrote a book about Tavistock that's considered like a really really good book.
Might be the one I have. I think that is the book I have. Let me see.
Oh, is it?
I think so. I've got it, but it's one that I need to read through again because it's been a while.
Yeah, I thought it was John Coleman, but maybe somebody in the comments knows.
Okay. Okay, yeah, John Coleman. That's one. Oh, it looks like it's come back down in price again. Yeah, because there for a while, that one was going for good night, several $100s. So I don't know what was up with that. Priscilla Presley dated Robert Ashley, who was married to Linda Thompson. Yeah, there's a very incestuous world of film and television. But and acting and rock bands and all those, if you don't have wealthy parents to prop you up, it's very similar to journalism, because same thing in journalism. If you're a cub reporter for the New York Times, and you don't have mommy and daddy's trust fund to live off of,
Yeah.
you're gonna fall out of that really quick. You might
Yeah.
survive for a little while, but most all those reporters come from old money, and that's one easy way to guarantee that those people are going to always toe the line because, you know.
Oh yeah. I was just reading something
Or,
about the Weather Underground. You know, they were like the big radicals in the 1960s and 70s, and how they all came from like very wealthy families. You know, they weren't
totally organic, totally
But-
organic. Just regular people,
yeah.
doing, you know, regular trust fund people. And you know, that's funny. I was telling one of my kids the other day about when I had a store in Dallas. I had a few trust fund customers that were trust fund kids, and I say kids. These were, some of them were older than I am. And man, you talk about some weird folks out there. The trust fund kids are some weird people.
Oh yeah.
I'm not saying all of them, but there's some weird. And the more that you start digging into and seeing, like, there's some of those like old families, that old money, that they have to really work at having a normal public persona that is palatable to people like the rest of us unwashed masses. There's a YouTuber who says he is the son of a famous musician, and all he talks about is demonology and entertainment.
That'd be interesting.
I mean, I saw your video the other day about Jack Black doing the prayer to Satan or whatever and I need to find that clip. I remember when that happened, and like you said,
that was my video. I made a video about that, or did you see it somewhere else?
Yeah, no, I saw your video. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I remember when you used to cover that. I remember when that happened, and a lot of my friends that were talking about the demonology stuff were like, "Holy crap! Did you see that?" And then, of course, the Kanye West thing, like you're saying, that stole the show. That was what everybody remembered from it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was. There's. I'm trying to remember. There was a commercial I worked on. I can't remember what the PR firm was, but it was the first time I'd ever met like a high level person in like one of these PR companies, and I only had to interact with him because he was kind of the bag man. He was the money guy for this commercial. So he was renting this van that I was going to then drive to pick up equipment and all. So he and I had to interact. But I remember that being a really weird interaction. It's really hard to describe because it was like definitely this, I am up here, you're down here, and I am only grudgingly interacting with you.
Yeah.
And because I have to for this moment in time. But I remember walking away from that being like, that was just very strange. Like what? Like there's a soullessness about some of those guys, and that was my first time to ever experience it. Where I was like, that was strange. But and then the more film people I've met, the more and by film people I mean a lot of the regular folks are fine, but when you start getting into the upper echelons, there's some weird folks. But I know that won't surprise anybody.
This book sounds interesting. I've never heard of it, but I just looked it up.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that too. It's unfortunate that with Dave McGowan gone, I think there's several of Dave McGowan's books that I would love to see. I would love to have seen more of, taken even farther. Like I think, like Program to Kill. I think a lot of what he presented there is really the beginning of a thesis, and there's a lot more there to be had. So I hope that more people can pick up where he left off, and maybe we can all, as a community, dig into that. I know have you been over to Patrick's Program to Kill channel?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Pat, there's a lot of good stuff there that he's dug up in old archival video.
So I think this was the Izzy Griffin was the son of a famous rock star who has the YouTube channel. I have to look it up.
I'm going to mark that. More books to clutter my library here.
Yeah.
What's it called again? No.
Well, this one's no one's dad is a plumber, and just kind of, I guess it's kind of similar to Dave McGowan book just about the backgrounds of a lot of the rock stars.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
all right. Duly noted. I will.
Mark Devlin. The name sounds kind of familiar, but I don't know why.
Well, it's good that the Tavistock Institute book is back in print. So there's been a couple of books that I've got, and there's one I ordered from the UK, and I haven't even read it yet. At the time when I ordered it, it was like I wanted to order it before I forgot about it, so I got it. And somebody had mentioned it on my channel. It was like, hey, you need to get this book. And I ordered it, and it came all the way from the UK. And then when it came in, it had, and I have the pictures of it somewhere. It had a note saying it had been inspected because of what it was. Like I get a lot of mail from overseas. A lot of my books that come from overseas come over, and there's no issue at all. But this one had been opened and inspected and had a note saying, "Hey, what you ordered is problematic, and we're checking it out." Let me see. Hold on. I'll get the book. Well, my apologies. I'm going to have to dig for that. I thought I knew exactly where it was, but I'll have to pull that out in another video. But that and one other book I've had where my mail got inspected. I got a little message from the postal service saying, "Hey, we're watching you because of what you're ordering." So,
wow.
Which is kind of a badge of honor, you've got a solid library when you get those notes in your mail. Because it's a not subtle at all, like shot across your bow, like, hey buddy, you're looking at stuff you shouldn't be looking at.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Anybody else have any questions, any comments, anything?
Well, there's some pretty good ones here, but it's getting kind of late for me.
Yeah, me too. I know my energy is about to run out. But
yeah, I think you can replay this, and I know I missed plenty of the comments probably, but yeah, this was a lot of fun. We'll have to do this. Pick some other topic and do it again.
Yeah, well, definitely. And I know some of my my audience out there that was talking about coming and watching this. We need to plan out some things to have some. If people want to bring up specific topics and throw down and give everybody a heads up about what all we're going to cover and see what all we can stir up, because that's one of the cool things about this and having this audience and is there might be some other things lurking out there that people watching this know about that you and I've never heard about, and we might dig up a whole new line of research as a result. A couple of people I really want to interview. There's some old friends of mine that were around during a lot of the weird satanic stuff that was happening during the late 70s and early 80s. That I really want to get on tape before they're at a point where they can't really talk about that anymore, just from age. But I have some friends that were somewhat, on the periphery of that and have some firsthand knowledge of some of that. If I can get them on camera talking about it, that would be cool to have recorded. So, but anyway, let me know whatever. Appreciate you sharing your audience with me and us all, getting to party like this. So
absolutely, it's a lot of fun.
Another topic and have everybody vote on something, and
I think you can do like a poll on YouTube, like list out options and people can vote. So maybe we can give that a shot next time.
I'm game, and just let me know. And to all your audience out there, and hopefully some folks from my channel that have stumbled over here, appreciate you all coming over to watch this and tolerate all of our ramblings and all this foolishness about this stuff.
All right. Well, thanks again, Mitch. I really appreciate it. It's great talking.
Yeah, you too. And Andy, yeah, it's been fun, and we'll do it again sometime.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. All right, man.
All right.
Talk to you
See ya.
later. Okay.